Welcome, and thank you for inviting us to present to you today. My name is Colleen Coogan. I'm the Large Whale Take Reduction Team Coordinator. When I was invited to present to you, I believed we would have a proposed rule and draft environmental impact statement related to modifications to the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Plan, published and ready for public comment. That rule has not yet been released for comment, and so I'll give you an update on the status of the rule, but I'll share my time tonight with Caroline Good from the Headquarters Right Whale team to give us an update on vessel strike recovery efforts, and Diane Borggaard, the Northeast Right Whale Recovery Coordinator, will discuss other important management and prioritization work going on to promote recovery of North Atlantic right whales. The news that Phil Hamilton is sharing about the status of right whales underscores the importance of continued efforts across these many fronts. As you know from last year's presentation, in April 2019, we received a near consensus recommendation from the Take Reduction team to reduce the risk of Northeast lobster and Jonah crab fisheries, largely through a reduction in the number of buoy lines and the broad use of weakened buoy lines in the Northeast lobster and Jonah crab fisheries. The team's recommendations would reduce the impacts of those fisheries by at least 60%, the minimum target that we provided to them as necessary to meet the MMPA mandated potential biological removal level. In August and through the fall of 2019, we held 8 scoping meetings attended by over 800 people, and we received tens of thousands of comments. Given the team's respect for the regional diversity of fishing conditions and practices across this large management area, at the same time, the states were also conducting scoping meetings with their fishing industries, particularly the state of Maine, who was working with their zone councils to develop regionally tailored measures. We expressed our support for state proposals with a commitment to a minimum of a 60% risk reduction and to the team's stated priority to apply a reduction across the jurisdictions somewhat evenly. Starting in late December, as well as through early 2020, we received state proposals, and we spent the spring developing and analyzing alternative suites of conservation measures in a draft environmental impact statement and in a draft proposed rule that would implement a preferred alternative. In assembling measures, we considered team, scoping, and state input, and we used the decision support tool discussed here last year to determine whether the tool estimated at least a 60% risk reduction. The DEIS also used other tools, primarily the co-occurrence model developed for NIMS by IEC, to evaluate whether those models also demonstrated a likely 60 to 80% risk reduction. We're hopeful that the resulting proposed rule and draft environmental impact statement will be filed soon for public comments. We'll get the word out broadly and plan public meetings to facilitate rapid review. Essentially, we'll start with remote informational public meetings to provide an overview and orientation on the documents so that people can review the materials quickly. A week or two after the informational meetings, we'll hold remote public comment meetings to invite people to provide us with their comments. We may be restricted to a 45-day comment period, the minimum required for the draft environmental impact statement, because our goal is to have the final rule and the DEIS completed as a final environmental impact statement by May 31st, 2021. That is a schedule that was accepted by the courts for completion of an Endangered Species Act consultation on a number of fisheries in the Northeast United States. That a biological opinion concluding that consultation will consider the impact of these fisheries as they would be modified by the rule. So the modifications in this rule need to be reasonably foreseeable for us to be able to include that action in our consultation. Next up is Caroline Good, who's going to give you a status update on vessel strike mitigation efforts.
Given the 2 vessel strike events this year in U.S. waters, it is clear that additional action is needed to enhance our vessel strike mitigation efforts. The following is a brief summary of our ongoing activities in support of that goal. First, we continue to investigate the 2 right whale calves struck by vessels this year in U.S. waters. Second, we introduced a new voluntary right whale slow zone program this summer, which is similar to our existing dynamic management program. But in this case, the zones can be triggered by either visual or acoustic detections in line with the recommendation we received from the Northeast Implementation Team. Mariners are asked to slow to 10 knots or less in active slow zones, and outreach is aimed at vessels of all sizes with an added focus on recreational boaters. Third, we are in the process of finalizing a report evaluating mandatory vessel speed restrictions in seasonal management areas and the Voluntary Dynamic Management Area Program. Also, we've conducted a preliminary assessment of small vessel traffic within SMAs, in this case, vessels that are less than 65 feet in length, and provided recommendations for enhancements to current programs and regulations to improve their effectiveness. Additionally, we are collaborating on an assessment of vessel cooperation with recommended routes that were established in Cape Cod Bay and off Florida to encourage the separation of vessel traffic and whales in high-use habitats. And we are assembling a coast-wide encounter rate risk model to identify areas of elevated vessel strike risk based on recent years' vessel traffic and right whale distribution. We have contracted a study to investigate best practices to optimize outreach efforts to targeted components of the mariner community. And we have ongoing and upcoming collaborations with external research groups conducting work of relevance to vessel strike management. Finally, we continue to hold ongoing discussions and share information with Transport Canada regarding their vessel strike efforts. Next, we're going to hear from Diane Borggaard about recovery plan actions.
In addition to the efforts Colleen and Caroline mentioned, NIMS continue to work with our partners this year to further other right whale recovery plan activities. This includes working with our right whale, Northeast and Southeast U.S. implementation teams to assist with issues related to the status and conservation of right whales in the North Atlantic. Implementation teams are important to objectives like promoting creative solutions, among others. For example, the NEIT made a formal recommendation to NIMS, which included using acoustic information to enhance vessel strike reduction efforts, and NIMS used this information when developing the new right whale slow zones campaign in the Northeast U.S., as Caroline mentioned. Another objective of our regional implementation teams includes identifying and prioritizing information needs that can be best addressed through enhanced partnerships. When NIMS announced that right whales were being added as a species in the spotlight, we also announced that we would work on a 5-year priority action plan with input from our implementation teams. We are working on the development of the action plan now. The right whale implementation team's population evaluation tool subgroup is continuing efforts to develop a population viability analysis to characterize right whale extinction risk. Richard Pace from the Northeast Fisheries Science Center is the chair of the subgroup and can answer any questions folks have. We want to thank all those involved in these teams' efforts and give a shout out to any members listening. Bilateral transboundary collaboration is critical to the species recovery. NIMS appreciates the continued coordination with Canada on right whale conservation and recovery efforts through bilateral discussions and frequent information sharing with the Department of Fisheries and Ocean Canada and Transport Canada at both the senior leadership and staff level. We also appreciate DFO and Transport Canada supporting our implementation teams and PET subgroup through their participation. NIMS is continuing to finalize a report summarizing a right whale scenario planning initiative through which we were able to explore plausible future conditions for right whales and to develop possible options to address those conditions and improve recovery. This exercise helped prioritize right whale management and science needs in light of changing ocean conditions and anthropogenic impacts. Draft priorities were previously presented to the implementation teams for consideration. A final report should be available shortly. Partnerships are critical to right whale recovery, and we can't do this alone. The short list on this slide represents dozens of people and only a subset of those contributing to right whale recovery in the U.S. Thanks to all of you participating this week and those that are not able to be here. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to present today on some of NOAA's right whale management efforts.